One of the places where the wrestlers started to stumble, and it started with the Brazilians, where the Brazilians could step in and shut down the wrestlers. Shoot box comes to mind, where they could stop the wrestlers or they could create enough of a scramble to get the wrestler tired, get them back on their feet, and go to work. But one of the things where that happened, when you had the really good wrestlers, but they went over to MMA, they got so excited about the new tools. And this is just human nature. The wrestlers weren't wrong for that. Human nature, you start to learn new tools, right? You've been in the practice room wrestling since you were 8 years old. Some guys since they were 5 years old. They come up through the high school ranks. They go into the college ranks, some of them beyond to the international ranks. It's very hard to learn new things. You know, you'll finish a wrestling career. You'll look back, it's been 7 or 8 years since you learned anything new. It gets to the point where you're going into practice, you're sharpening up what you knew, you're working on your condition, you're getting some live goes, you're in the showers, headed home. It's as simple as that. And you're pursuing World Olympic dreams, but at some point you largely are going to top out, particularly if you're with the same coaches in the same room doing the same time. I mean, eventually you're going to have the system down and there's not a lot of room to grow. So when the wrestlers would go over to MMA, they would be so excited about learning a jab and learning a cross and learning a hook and, learning a tie clinch or a plum or something like that, learning some groundwork. They'd be so excited, and their gains in this new sport were so quick and so rapid, and it was rejuvenating, it was fun for them. The byproduct of that, even though they were putting in the same time, morning workout, rest, coming in the afternoon, early evening, workout, it was the same amount of time, their gains are improved. What was happening as a byproduct when they weren't working on their main skill is it's going down. Now, that's just logic. That just makes good sense. But what was happening with the top wrestlers, and the one thing you will lose, it's the one thing that you will lose in wrestling if you don't wrestle regularly, is what's called a reshot. Now, every wrestler knows, no matter how good they are, they'll all tell you the same thing, which is the first shot by a good wrestler is just to get you in. It's the second shot that leads to the third shot that leads to the changing of the position that we call a takedown. When a wrestler isn't staying busy and proficient in there doing these scrambles and doing the shot to a reshot, what we call chain wrestling, one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, if that's what it takes to wear your opponent down, catch him off balance, and take him off his feet. If you're not doing that, you will lose that tool. That tool it's not like riding a bike where that's always there. That one has to be sharpened on a very regular basis. I almost want to say daily, but an extremely regular basis. So when wrestlers started coming over to MMA, they'd close a distance, they'd hit that one big shot, and if they hadn't drilled this, if they hadn't tuned that tool up, they simply could not go to shot number 2 and shot number 3. Guys that have tested my theory that I just laid out for you, a couple of them that come to mind. Johnny Hendricks, when he was training for George St. Pierre, and he had major success getting takedowns, but he missed on his first takedown a lot. But he was in. Now he's got his hands on St. Pierre. Then he can go to something else. Johnny Hendricks versus Robbie Lawler. Fight he won, also the fight he lost, but he did a very good job with the reshots, with that in between, because he practiced it. Frankie Edgar spent a meaningful amount of time at his alma mater, which was Rutgers University. And Frankie Edgar's just in there. He's amateur wrestling. He goes into a fight with Uriel Rodriguez, and Frankie could not miss. His double leg, the timing was impeccable, but if he didn't get it on the first try, boom, he reshot and he reshot. That's one thing that Uriel, in reverse, Uriel, not being a lifetime wrestler, is not ready for. You can prepare for that initial onslaught pretty quickly. You can get good hips, see the timing, know how to bump a guy, get a side whizzer, pull him up, take your legs out of danger. You can learn that in a short period of time. You can even learn to do what Nate Quarry would call the anti-wrestle, where you just back up. The guy comes in, back up. Keep that space there. He can never get his hands on you. You can learn that quickly, but Frankie in the Uriel fight, boom, boom, reshot. Frankie, that for reasons unknown, I don't want to be hard on Frankie, stopped going into Rutgers. He just stopped going in. And that tool wasn't quite as sharp. And when he got in his next fight, it just wasn't quite as sharp. And I think the thing that Frankie learned, I think he would agree with me, but the thing that I learned through Frankie's trials was it's got to be sharp, and you got to be doing it all the time. So you end up with this perfect balance. So what if you go, okay, Chael, let's look at it from reverse. Let's look at a guy like Ben Askren, who spends 90% of his time in a wrestling room sharpening those tools. Oh, okay, I agree. 90% was too much if that only leaves 10% for everything else. Because largely in wrestling, it's not what do I do with the guy once I get my hands on him. It's how do I get my hands on him? How do I go from here to here? Guys, real quick story, but this happened 3 weeks ago. I was in Honolulu, a Bellator event. Lima Lay was defending her title, go out there, but I did a seminar with Royler Gracie. And this was very cool for me. Much like you guys, I've always wanted to share Matt with Royler Gracie, but I never have. Now I can say I have practiced with Royce. But I've watched Royler Gracie wear out 20 men. But I never understood the philosophy. Physically, I understood what he did. I never understood his philosophy until he ran his class. Now, it was plain as day and it was right in front of me, but it was one of those things where I needed him to say it for the switch to go. And all Royce's philosophy was if we're going to fight, we either fight from right here. So anybody listening to this or watching it right now, imagine you and I quite literally get into a fight right now. Right now. How scared are you? Let me guess. Not at all. I couldn't possibly do anything to you. I cannot touch you. I could throw a perfect punch. I could throw a perfect kick. I can't touch you. How scared and worried do I have to be about you? Not at all. I can go on about my day. You can't touch me. So this was Royce's philosophy. We're either going to fight from here, where there is no fighting to take place, or we're glued to each other, where it's going to be very hard for you to do anything to me. By example, go look at boxing. If you ever get chest to chest in boxing, or you get into a clinch, or you grab a guy, that's illegal. You cannot hit the guy from there. They will separate you. The reason it's illegal, there's just not a lot that can happen. If the sport was allowed to be contested chest to chest, you'd really just have guys leaning on each other and catching their breath and pushing and pulling. There's just not a whole lot that goes on there. You got to have a little bit of space. So Royce's entire philosophy, even though I watched it through his career, I needed to have this one class with him. We either fight from way too much distance to do anything to each other, or I take all the distance away. And now again, I'm at a point where there's just not a whole lot we can do to each other. Now I can start to be more systematic. Now I can start to work my approach, in his case of jiu-jitsu, where I'm going to lock something on you, I'm going to stretch you out, I'm going to make you say uncle, and we're all going to get up and walk out of here as friends. That was the philosophy, though. And it's that entry that is so important. And I'll watch wrestlers that go a little bit heavy on the practice room wrestling and not enough on the entries, or I'll watch a wrestler that goes the other way, where it's all about the entry because this is brand new, but then they lose the other two. There's a perfect balance there. I don't come to you to offer you exactly what that is. It's got to be 15% over here and 35% over here. Nah, I'm not going to do that. I just will share with you that there are some tools that you can develop through your life that if you walk away from, make believe I've got a beautiful resume and I've got a mantle at home with a beautiful trophy on it that says how great I was at this sport. If you walk away from that sport, if you do not sharpen that knife on a regular basis, it's going to become dull.